that part of the world. Yeah, okay, I get it, but still, just the sheer amount of equipment that they seem to leave behind, like that seems weird. I don't get that. I mean, I wonder if that found its way to Ukraine. I do, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm not really a geopolitics kind of guy. The long term consequences, I think, are, by the looks of it, I mean, we are like all very, very close to 2023, and it's we're going to be like what, 9? We're going to be coming on to a year for this war. I don't think the Russians wanted that. I think the Russians it's not going according to what they wanted. And I think sooner or later there's going to be some kind of peace talks, and we'll see what happens. It's a problem because either way you're going to end up with a NATO kind of global home rule Ukraine, or which is like against what Russia wanted in the first place. So, or it just grinds on and on and on. But I mean, my personal thoughts on this are like, regardless of the politics, is that both Russia and Ukraine, like everywhere else in the white world, have like shit birth rates. When you look at World War II, the European nations had like high birth rates, it was like we had birth rates which were the equivalent of like Afghanistan or something. You're talking like 3 or 4 children, and a lot of like, so at least half of them will be. So each woman may be producing 2 boys, which will become men who could fight in a war. We don't have that now. And so when you're looking at sending the youth of Russia and Ukraine, both of them, and they're like fight hundreds of thousands of prime sort of young men are just being like wiped out. This is catastrophically bad for the demographics of those countries and the long term health of those countries. Because when you've entered into this kind of modernity, this particular era of modernity where we are, and everybody's got fucking microplastic in their ball sacks, everybody's eating shit all of the time, the fucking women are lesbians, and everybody's turning into a tranny. It's already bad enough. The last thing that you need is to send in your prime fucking stock to wipe each other out in a war like this. Because there's no coming back from it. And the worst of it is that America is such a nihilistic empire that they don't even give 2 shits about their own stock. You can at least say that, I mean, I don't believe for a second that Zelensky cares about the Ukrainian people, but at least in theory, I can understand the Russian motivation here. Even if it is quite cold in regards to Russian manpower, but yeah, it's they're sacrificing an entire generation of men, which we can't afford anymore.
Yeah, and even more horrifying is that the solution to that will be mass immigration from Africa and the Middle East.
Certainly, in the case of Ukraine.
Yeah. I mean, there's a country murdering itself here. It's just absolutely fucking dreadful. Yeah, I mean, we didn't even go into that. You know, the whole stuff about Ukraine being a proxy for America, the Ukrainians themselves having, their own interests, their own history, whatever, but it doesn't matter because they're basically owned and controlled by America. I mean, there's that whole aspect. I mean, it's been gone into in other episodes of Millennial, but do you have anything to say about that?
Well, I mean, what I will say is that I said at the beginning I wasn't going to get invested, I wasn't going to get involved in the inevitable infighting that would happen because of this. And I didn't. To be honest, I didn't. But it seemed to me that the argument which came down the side of nationalism for everybody, which was the Ukraine side. All right, let's just take that on board for a second. The nationalism for everybody argument, as opposed to the other side of it, which was more the third positionist stance, which was that, well, NATO is gay, America is gay, the West is gay, and Putin is standing up for himself and a more traditional order, and he was provoking to the war. That's kind of the two stances on it. But it seems to me that the nationalism for everybody argument died with the Nord Stream pipeline. And in fact, if you're going to talk about this in terms of national sovereignty, like, I'm English and I'm an isolationist. So my point here is that I don't think we should be involved, and I said this at the start, in either way. The Ukrainians have absolutely the right to defend their homeland. They do not have the right to demand money from my government or arms, or that my government should intervene on their behalf at all. And the only people doing that are the deep state of Britain and America, as always, colluding. But even if we take that, even if we take the argument that, well, national sovereignty and the sovereignty of people is what's most important, well, we don't have that. I don't have that. We don't have that in England. We don't have that in Britain. We aren't in control of our own destinies as it is. If you could put it to a plebiscite for the masses and say, do you free, Martin, this is where we get back to the nudge and the applied psychology and the propagandizing of the population. If you could strip all of that bullshit away and you said, is this any of our business? Most of them would say, no, it isn't, to be honest. And we would stay out of it. So this idea that of national sort of determination is refuted by the very fact that we are living under an American empire. I mean, the Nord Stream pipeline thing is the most extreme example of it, because all of a sudden, in the name of sort of sovereignty and defending the ideal of people having sovereign power over their land, we're going to blow up Germany's main source of energy, reduce the people to poverty, and they're not going to have a say in it. They're fucked. But so our energy prices go through the roof, and we've got our own people freezing to death in their homes and choking on mold. Where's that argument for national sovereignty now? All you're left with is being a bunch of fucking whores for the American deep state.
Yeah.
You can make that argument in principle, but it dies as soon as the sovereignty of the nation states of Western Europe are done away with. They were done away with after World War II. But now it's explicit, because now it's like, well, we're expected to just freeze and choke and pay like £3 for a loaf of bread? What, in solidarity for the people of Ukraine, even though we never had a say in any of this? I don't see that argument stacking up at all.
Yeah, and even though the people of Ukraine were basically, this war was imposed upon them by America, by continually goading Russia. So it's not even their. I mean, they didn't do this either. So the whole thing has been orchestrated, and I agree with you completely. The whole thing about Nord Stream, I did an entire episode of my weekly show, The Gram, about Nord Stream, because it just seemed incredible at the time. It seemed so significant, and it still does. America fucked one of its own allies in such a way that it's going to have repercussions long beyond, like, even if this war ended tomorrow. Well, Nord Stream still isn't there. And I mean, Germany's fucked. You know, I guess you could say, well, once the war's over, they'll just repair the pipeline because it won't be a problem anymore, Germany trading with Russia. But that's not really the point. It will still be a problem for America if Germany does that, because that strengthens the relationship between Germany and Russia. And it also strengthens Germany, which, again, America doesn't want. It wants people buying stuff from America. So this whole thing is disastrous for Europe. And again, it's not just about the war. The war is the excuse for America to bomb that pipeline. But the effects of that will go far beyond the war.
Yeah, you reach this kind of precipice. You reach this uncomfortable position where if we are going to kind of take the idea of national sovereignty and nationalism seriously, or what's in the best interest for the people of Europe, we have to turn around to the Americans and say, it's not you. You are the problem here, because Germany and Russia were doing fine. So it's a complicated situation, but we reach the point where nationalists in Europe, and I know this has been kind of a bit of a running thing, without being insulting to the American people or how that all came about, and you can blame this entirely on the deep state and on the State Department and everything, but we've reached a place here where we are better off being allies with powers on the Eurasian landmass than you. And in my own opinion, especially when we bring in the toxic rebrand and the trannies and the gay flag and the fucking blacks and worshipping all of this fucking bullshit that America just pisses all over the world, which everybody hates. So it's like, you know, you're like Lenny. America's become like Lenny of Mice and Men, this kind of giant retard thing, which just threatens to break everybody's skulls. And it's like, can we like do something about this problem? Can we do something about the retard problem which America has become here?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything to say to that, really. I think it's the whole thing about national sovereignty is very interesting. I remember you got into an argument with someone on Telegram who was talking about Ukraine and national sovereignty. It's important that we defend Ukraine because their national sovereignty. And you made this point about Nord Stream. Well, what about German national sovereignty? And of course, what about British national sovereignty and all these countries in Western Europe that are under the thumb of America? But the whole thing is, and then you ended up with people having to say, well, it probably wasn't America that bombed the pipeline. Because that rubbishes their whole thing about defending the American line here.
Well, it doesn't even matter. It wouldn't surprise me that if it was the British Special Forces, but it doesn't matter because
they were doing it under the control.
Yeah,
of America,
we're still under the thumb of Washington. So once again, we're left with the problem of national sovereignty. If we are willing to go right to the line on of a nuclear war with Russia, then I remember Nick Griffin in the BNP back in the day. And he was offered, he did an interview and he said this, when the BNP were doing great, the BNP surge. And the Nick Griffin was approached behind the scenes and he spoke about this and he said, we will we'll turn a blind eye, but we don't want you talking about the money power. We don't want you talking about the banks and this kind of thing. And then in another interview, Nick Griffin said, like, in this hypothetical situation where the BNP, they gained power, they gained a lot of power in Britain. This is, to be fair, like, this is how seriously they took the BNP threat in 2000. Now, of course, they just don't allow them to register as a party. So the question, what Nick Griffin had to address for the base was that, are we going to start and deport people if the BNP gain power? And I always remember this speech that I watched of Nick Griffin, which I found was interesting, and he said, we can't do that because if we did, the Americans would bomb us. They'd flatten Britain. If the BNP gain power and we begin sending people home on ships, on aircraft carriers, on whatever it happens to be, sort of forced deportations of the immigrants since the Blair era and whatnot, the Americans would bomb us. And I thought that it's true, isn't it? It's if you're honest about it, and if you think about how that works with the bureaucracy, if you think of the implications on the so-called special relationship, he's right. They would, I think. I think Britain would become a pariah state, but not because of Europe. Well, now it's different with the European Union, maybe. But I think it wouldn't lead to that. It would be sanctions. It would be all of these problems that would come first. But I think he has a point. I think America would be the first country to kick up a fuss about such a policy. Not Russia, not China, not any of the Islamic countries. It would be the Americans. It
Absolutely.
would be the American deep state who said, you do not deport those immigrants.
Yeah, I completely agree. America is the thing that is blocking us from fixing the situation in Europe. I mean, even the political parties, even assuming that they wanted to, it would be a fear of America that stopped them from actually doing it. Because America, I mean, everyone knows the firepower is just enormous. And I think they would not hesitate to use it. I think if they thought that, Le Pen is getting into power in France, she's going to start mass deportations, well, I guess they would try economic sanctions first. Well, this gets us to the issue of how powerful is America at this stage. They would try the economic sanctions first, for sure. But would they then go further? And, that leads us back to the Afghanistan withdrawal. I don't know. This is something that's impossible for me to judge.
They've got a lot of tools in the box. I mean, whether you want to talk about in terms of the Americans actually dropping bombs on London because we were deporting immigrants, it seems ridiculous. But they can do a lot. They can do a lot with torpedoing, the central bank stepping in. We've seen it with Russia. We would get the Russia treatment. What they have thrown at Russia, we would get, but we couldn't deal with that. No. Because we're not sufficient the way Russia is.
Yeah, exactly.